They told everyone they'd be back before dark. Just a short drive. One last stretch of road. Nothing worth worrying about. The last photo on their phone shows headlights cutting through an empty highway. No faces. No smiles. Just asphalt disappearing into black. Hours later, their car was found parked perfectly straight, engine cold, doors unlocked. Luggage still in the trunk. Snacks on the seats. A child's jacket folded the way a parent folds it when they plan to hand it back later. There were no signs of panic. No calls for help. No reason for them to leave that car. And that's the part no one can explain. Because this isn't one story. It's many. Different families. Different years. Different roads. All ending the same way. Mid-journey, mid-promise, mid-life. Somewhere between the last exit and the place they meant to sleep. Something made them stop. Something that didn't leave fingerprints. Something that didn't need to rush. Stay with this story, because by the end, you'll realize these families didn't just disappear. They were interrupted. These weren't thrill seekers or people chasing danger. They were parents needing a break. Children promised ice cream at the next stop. Couples trying to remember what it felt like to rest beside each other. Every trip began the same way. Bags packed with care. Routes planned in advance. Destinations chosen for comfort and safety. Beach towns. National parks. Cheap motels near the highway. Places people go when they want to feel secure. What followed is harder to explain. Police reports exist. Timelines were written. Statements were taken. And yet, when those documents are compared, the details refuse to align. One officer notes the car doors were locked. Another says they weren't. A witness remembers headlights still on. Another swears the road was completely dark. Some families were reported missing within hours. Others weren't noticed for days. In a few cases, voicemail messages were left, casual, unfinished, as if the speaker assumed they would explain everything later. They never did. Investigators used careful language. No evidence of foul play. No clear suspects. Case remains open. But between those lines sit the unanswered questions. Why stop there? Why leave everything behind? Why do multiple cases describe the same quiet details? Cars untouched, belongings arranged, routes that make sense until the final mile. As you listen, ask yourself something simple. If it were you, would you have noticed the warning signs before the road went silent? They chose the place because it was quiet. A simple rental just off a two-lane highway. The kind of stop families make when the drive has gone on too long, and everyone agrees they'll finish it in the morning. Trees pressed close on all sides. One porch light. No neighboring buildings close enough to see. The family was small. 2 parents. 1 child. Old enough to ask questions. Young enough to trust the answers. Check-in was uneventful, but not entirely right. The room number written on the confirmation didn't match the door they were given. The clerk hesitated before correcting it, then laughed it off like a harmless mistake. He didn't meet their eyes when he handed over the key. Inside, the air smelled unused. The guest book sat open on the table, pages filled with polite notes and dated memories, until the writing stopped. The last entry ended halfway through a sentence. No signature. No explanation. They noticed the quiet first. No traffic. No insects. No distant sound of another room settling in for the night. When the child asked where everyone was, one of the parents answered too quickly. A local passed by as they unloaded the car. He slowed down just enough to look at them, then looked away. Didn't wave. Didn't smile. Just shook his head, almost imperceptibly, and kept walking. Later, as dusk settled in, the porch light flickered on its own. Once, twice, then stayed dark. They stood together in the doorway for a moment, bag still in hand, listening to the wind move through the trees and the floorboards shift beneath their feet. They later realized this was the last time anyone saw them together. Night came without ceremony. No sunset worth remembering. Just the slow dimming of what little light reached the windows. At first, the sounds felt normal, would adjusting to the cold. Wind passing through the trees. The kind of noises people explain away because they want to sleep. But then came the pauses between them, too long, too deliberate, as if something was listening for a response. Footsteps creaked outside the room once, then stopped. One parent checked the lock before bed, then checked it again. The door was secure, the windows untouched. They told themselves that was enough. Sometime after midnight, the phone lost signal. Not slowly, not one bar at a time. Just gone. No service. No emergency call. No way to reassure anyone back home. They laughed it off in whispers, promising to deal with it in the morning. Morning came, and something was wrong. The door was unlocked. No signs of force. No damage. Just the lock turned from the inside out. Shoes sat where they'd been left, except one pair had shifted slightly, angled toward the hallway. A backpack rested against the wall instead of the chair. Small things, easy to doubt, easy to argue about quietly, while a child watched their faces for answers. Fear didn't arrive all at once. It settled in gently, in careful glances, in lowered voices, in the way one parent stood a little closer to the other while pretending everything was fine. They talked about leaving. After breakfast. After one more check of the car. After convincing themselves they weren't overreacting. That night, someone knocked on the door, but no one was there. Would you have stayed or left immediately? Morning arrived too quietly. The car was still parked exactly where they'd left it, dust untouched, doors closed. Inside the room, the lights were on. Not bright, just enough to suggest someone expected to return. Food sat out on the small table. Bread unwrapped, cups half filled. A pan left on the stove, cold now, as if breakfast had been interrupted by something minor, something temporary. No one answered when the door was called through. There were no signs of violence, and yet there were too many signs of life. Jackets draped over chairs, a phone charging by the bed, shoes placed neatly side by side, not kicked off in a hurry. The kind of order that doesn't happen when people leave quickly or willingly. The curtains shifted with the breeze, brushing the wall like slow breaths. Later, investigators would review the security footage. The camera faced the hallway. It worked all night until it didn't. The feed froze at a single frame just before dawn. No distortion. No power surge. 1 second of time held too long, then nothing after. The GPS told a similar story. Their route logged perfectly up to the moment they arrived. The final coordinate sat fixed on that building, as if the signal had nowhere else to go. One object stood out. In the center of the room, placed carefully on the table, was the key. Not dropped, not forgotten. Turned so the number faced upward, easy to read. Intentional. The music fades away here. Just for a moment. Because this is where the questions begin to pile up. Why leave everything behind? Why take nothing at all? And why does it feel like someone made sure the room stayed exactly as it was after they were gone? When the sound returns, it's darker, slower, and the room is still empty. If stories like these stay with you after the sound fades, then you already understand why they're told this way. Stay here. Listen closely. Some details don't surface unless you're willing to sit with the silence. If you have a thought you can't shake, what do you think happened? Or what feels wrong but hard to name? Leave it behind. Others read those traces. Sometimes they recognize them. And if you've ever been traveling, ever stopped somewhere that felt slightly off, you're not alone in that either. The road in front of you now looks empty. Fog rolls in low, swallowing the lines, swallowing the distance. Headlights stretch forward, but they don't reach as far as they should, because these aren't the only families who vanished while trying to rest. Next time, we'll talk about a place that didn't forget the people who stayed there. A house where the walls seemed to hold onto something long after the doors were closed. Until then, just listen to the wind. One footstep echoes in the distance.